In this video, we're computing a trigonometric integral involving sines and cosines. And this one goes pretty quickly because we can rephrase the integrand in terms of a bunch of powers of the sine function next to a single factor of the cosine function, and then the chain rule is taken care of and we're basically done. So I'm going to do two things in the first step. First is just a reminder that the square root of the sine function is the same as the sine function to the 1/2 power. And second, I want to split off a factor of cosine squared so I can express that in terms of sine squared using a Pythagorean identity. So we apply that identity in the next step. We replace the square of the cosine with 1 minus sine squared. And then we distribute the sine x to the 1/2 to both of those terms. And this gives us a sine x to the 1/2 minus a sine x to the 5/2. And then it's critical that we have this other piece, the cosine x, attached to this. So I have a function of the sine function here on the left, sitting next to the derivative of the sine function. That takes care of the chain rule, and then we can just guess the antiderivatives of these sine functions by using the power rule. So I add 1 to each exponent, divide by the resulting number. The first one is going to be sine x to the 3/2 divided by 3/2. That's the same as 2/3 times sine x to the 3/2. The second one gives us sine x to the 7/2 divided by 7/2, or 2/7 times sine x to the 7/2. And it's an indefinite integral, and we throw in our plus c. So just as a mental check on our work here, when I differentiate each of these terms, I would bring down the power that's out in front. It cancels the fraction out in front. Subtract 1 from that power, and I get these two terms, sine x to the 1/2, sine x to the 5/2. But each of those comes with a cosine x because the chain rule requires you to differentiate the interior function. That's why it was important to have that cosine factor in the integrand before we guessed antiderivatives. If you enjoyed this video, or at least found it useful, check out another one by clicking one of the links on the left, or click the Zach's Lab logo on the right to explore dozens of physics and math playlists. As always, you can leave your questions, comments, and requests in the comments section below, and I'll get back to you within 24 hours. Thanks for watching Zach's Lab, and best of luck on your math and physics journey.